this video, I'll discuss networking and why you should do it. For the most part, it's better to be deliberate when it comes to your networks as opposed to haphazard, because either way, you're networking. So you might as well choose the networks that you're a part of. Often, when I talk to graduate students about the idea of networking, I can sense a little bit of tension in the room. And some graduate students feel uneasy about this idea of building out your network, or of networking, of going out to conferences or other events and sort of deliberately pursuing relationships that are professionally useful. Networking is not about turning people into instruments for your own professional gain. Networking is about building professional relationships with like-minded people, people you genuinely get along with, but you're doing it in a way that is bound by your profession. So you're not necessarily talking about all of your personal details and your personal life. Instead, you're focused on the work. And yes, there can be a little bit of overlap into discussing, your pets, your children, if you have children, your hobbies. Friendships are okay. Sometimes you might start with a professional relationship with a colleague or a fellow graduate student at your institution or somewhere else. And that relationship might turn into a friendship, a genuine, deep friendship. That's perfectly fine. But the idea is, at first, you should keep it to the work. You shouldn't necessarily get into your personal life right away, because that can lead to a few awkward things. It's important for you to build healthy professional relationships and understand the boundaries of personal versus professional relationships. The idea of don't be weird applies here, right? Don't be weird. And you know when you're being weird. So do your best to not be that person for a couple of reasons. One is it puts the other person on the receiving end in a difficult position. Most of the time, no one wants to shut you down. But what ends up happening is you do get sort of put in a box, and that diminishes the number of opportunities that you can have. If you're tempted to have those sorts of conversations, do some self-examination. Why are you trying to build that sort of relationship with a professional colleague? And the answer to that question should dictate further steps. Often when I talk to graduate students, they see networking as an event. You go off and you do the networking thing and you come away with something. That's not what networking is. You should have a long view. Assume that the relationships you're building will grow over time. The idea here is that when you meet someone, you've just met them. Keep nurturing the relationship over time by staying in touch, sending them work that you think is interesting, or talking about work, potentially collaborating on a project together. It could be a grant, it could be a paper. Maybe you're really good at data analysis and they have a data set that they would want you to help with. There are lots of different intersections and opportunities for you to talk to people and network with them. Sometimes as an associate professor, I'll go out to conferences and I will be approached. Doesn't happen a lot. Like, I kind of know, but who cares? Like, people know me or they don't know me. It doesn't really matter. But the idea here for this story is that I was approached at the time. And the graduate student did a really good job introducing themselves and the work that they were doing. And the interaction was good. However, shortly after that meeting, there was an ask, right? Can you do X for me? Now, that is a student that's not being mindful of networking and being mindful of the fact that relationships take time. You should never, in my view, meet someone in a professional capacity and have an ask like right after. Can you write a letter for me? Can you do X, Y, or Z for me? Because then it becomes very clear that the relationship was instrumental. Instead, the better approach is to think about your timeline, right? If I need a fellowship letter a year down the road, and yes, you should be thinking in terms of years, then I might want to get to know a faculty member and let them know what my work is like so that in 6 months, I will be able to ask for a letter so that they can write something that's genuine and about my work and how we've interfaced. It's important to have the relationship built out and authentic. Being genuine is always better. And sometimes you don't even have a goal in mind. There's someone whose work you really admire, so you want to talk to that person to get to know that work. And then later down the line, maybe they happen to be in a position where they can write you a letter or recommend you for a fellowship, or who knows. But the idea here is that the more genuine you are when it comes to building out your relationships, just the better it ends up being long term. A lot of networking happens during conferences. However, A lot of networking, in my view, shouldn't necessarily happen right after a conference session, like a paper session or anything like that. The reason being is that if I am presenting, my most recent work, right after my presentation, I'm a little fatigued. I've been talking for at least 10 minutes, sometimes more. I've been sort of deeply engaged in the work that I'm doing. I've fielded questions. And right after that, often I don't want to talk about it anymore. I can and I will. And if anyone sees this, you're more than welcome to approach me. However, what's important in that interaction is to follow up because chances are I will be in a place where I won't remember who I met right after my session. So, regardless of whether or not you approach faculty or anyone after a session where they've been talking, have a good conversation, make it short because chances are there are other people who want to interact with them as well. But follow up. If you have a paper or something that's of interest to the person you're speaking with, send it to them via an email. Do it quickly, like do it either that day or within a week. The other thing that you should know about conferences is that there's a strong likelihood that a lot of the people around you are introverts who are playing the role of an extrovert. I'm one of those people. I can network really well. I can talk to whomever, but it takes something out of me. So generally, I find moments to escape and recharge. So I say that because it's important for especially early career folks to not take any interaction personally because you do not know what's been going on in the life of the person you've been talking to, how many people they've spoken with, just what their social battery is like. Always assume that everyone's running on low. And I think with that assumption, you'll walk away with every interaction, for the most part, with a positive feeling. That doesn't mean that there aren't faculty and other graduate students who are bristly or someone you don't want to spend time with. And that's fine. Don't spend time with them, right? The thing about networking is you're in complete control over how you build out your network. And that network is often a reflection of you, of the things that you enjoy, both substantive interests, hobbies, ways of being, ways of socializing. Your network will reflect all of that. So build it out intentionally so that you reinforce the relationships that, pour into your cup as opposed to take from you. Another thing that graduate students should be mindful of is looking for opportunities where they can network in a more structured way. Often, this is a doctoral consortium or some other event where late career graduate students, sometimes early career scholars, are brought together, sometimes in a pre-conference session, to talk to one another and to talk to more senior faculty to get to know them and to network. You should seek out these opportunities for a couple of reasons. One is it's always nice to be in a semi-structured environment where you're sort of guided along. There'll be sessions often about certain topics like publishing or getting tenure, and that might alleviate some of the pressure that you have to ask the right question. But it's also nice to be around people roughly at your level in terms of seniority who are also interested in the same sorts of questions. Because remember, networking isn't necessarily about just networking up, right? Finding people who are more senior to you. It's about networking at your level as well, because your friends and your peers will all go off and do great things. So being in touch with what they're up to ends up being important. So remember, networking may be unavoidable, but that's a good thing because it lets you be in the driver's seat. Build out your network however you want, but make sure it's a professional network and don't stray too deep into being too personal too fast. Find opportunities to do it formally, and remember to take a long view. Taking a long view is probably the most important thing you can have when it comes to networking because these relationships can last your entire career. But what do you think? Share your stories and comments about networking below so that the entire community can benefit from it.